hopefully not the oldest, but the longest serving member to preside over this meeting, and I welcome you all. First, as always, the adoption of the agenda. If there are no objections, I propose to adopt the agenda. That seems to be the case. Number two, the chair's announcements. Our meeting today is, as usual, web streamed, and we have the full interpretation except Maltese for this afternoon available. So all the messes from Maltese origin, I apologize. Colleagues, following the COP decision of the 5th of March, AFET is invited to provide an opinion to the European Defence Industry Programme legislative file. The joint lead committee, ITRE and SEDE, have communicated a very tight calendar. Therefore, the deadline for amendments in AFET will be on this Thursday, the 20th March at 12 o'clock. At least it is still in the future. It wasn't yesterday. So, point 3 of the agenda is the adoption of the minutes of the 30th of January. If there are no remarks, we will deem them approved. And now we come to the first substantive point of this afternoon, the exchange of view with Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner-General of UNRWA. First of all, very warm welcome. And welcome to this joint meeting of the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Development Committee. I'm happy to co-chair this with Isabella Lövin, the Vice Chair of DEVE. Our meeting is extremely timely and important, and already welcomed Mr. Lazzarini, who is here with us today for an exchange of views. It has been a few years since you last came to the European Parliament, although I recall the meeting, I was already here. In the meantime, the world has changed. The region you serve is in deep trouble and shaken. The organization you lead, UNRWA, is heavily affected. Independently of the views any one of us here may hold on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or on the current and future role of UNRWA, I would like to state the fact that the EU's ongoing support to UNRWA, both political and financially, up until now, UNRWA has played an indispensable role in providing basic services to Palestinians in Gaza and beyond, of course. We look forward to hearing from you today about the latest developments and how your operations are affected, especially in light of the recent Israeli ban on UNRWA on its own territory. But before that, I would like to hand over to Isabella Lövin for her introductory remarks. Isabella.
Thank you, Mr. Galle and Michael. Dear colleagues, dear Commissioner-General Lazzarini, a warm welcome, also from the side of the Development Committee. The Development Committee has always been committed to upholding the humanitarian principles and supporting those in need. Commissioner-General Lazzarini, UNRWA plays an indispensable role in the lives of millions of Palestinian refugees. And today your work is more vital than ever to address the humanitarian situation in Gaza and in the West Bank, as well as across the region, in Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria, for Palestinian refugees who continue to face significant challenges. This is not just a humanitarian issue, it's a matter of human rights, dignity, and stability in an already fragile region. The international community must act decisively to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches those in need, and UNRWA is at the forefront of these life-saving efforts. The European Union has been a long-standing partner of UNRWA, recognizing that your work is essential for regional peace and security. But the challenges you face are growing: funding shortfalls, operational difficulties, limits to humanitarian access, and most recently, the ban by Israel to operate in its territory and increasing humanitarian needs. Commissioner-General Lazzarini, we're eager to hear your insights on the situation on the ground, the challenges facing UNRWA, and its future prospects. We look forward to your remarks and engaging discussion. So, Mr. Lazzarini, you have the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Distinguished chairs, members of the Committee on Foreign Affairs and Development, thank you for the invitation to brief you. Since we last met, UNRWA's operations have been undermined further, with implications for regional and international peace and stability. I echo the Secretary General's call at the Arab Summit in Cairo for the immediate, unconditional and dignified release of all hostages, the dignified release of Palestinian detainees, and the unimpeded flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. During the summit, Arab states rejected the forced displacement of Palestinians, reaffirmed their commitment to a two-state solution, and approved a plan for the recovery and reconstruction of Gaza. The Cairo Declaration also reaffirms the essential role of UNRWA. This is a recognition that the agency is an asset for a viable political transition. Distinguished chairs, UNRWA is facing significant operational challenges due to the Knesset laws condemned by the European Union and Arab states. One law prohibits UNRWA's operation in what the government of Israel considers its sovereign territory. This includes occupied East Jerusalem. The other law prohibits contact between UNRWA representative and Israeli officials. We were compelled to evacuate our headquarters compound in occupied East Jerusalem. The lack of visa has indeed effectively expelled international staff from the occupied West Bank. It's only thanks to the dedication of our Palestinian staff which has allowed UNRWA schools and health clinics to remain open, providing essential services to Palestinian refugees. In Gaza, a core team of international staff remains, but Israel no longer facilitates the entry or exit via Kerem Shalom. We have asked Egypt if international staff can enter and exit via Rafah. UNRWA is committed to staying and delivering its mandate until we can no longer do so in a principled manner. Members of the committee, the ceasefire brought much-needed respite after 15 months of brutal warfare. It enabled the return of hostages and Palestinian detainees to their families and a tenfold increase in the flow of humanitarian aid. This shows what is possible when there is a political will. It is, however, highly concerning that humanitarian aid is no longer allowed into Gaza, endangering civilian lives. During the war, UNRWA provided a platform for all humanitarian assistance. Since the ceasefire, we have significantly scaled up our response, providing food to 2 million people and clean water to nearly 500,000. We have opened nearly 40 new emergency shelters and provided tents for more than 60,000 people. And we provide some 17,000 medical consultations every day. And nearly 2,000 UNRWA staff vaccinated an estimated 200,000 children in the latest campaign against polio. UNRWA is also resuming education for as many children as possible through temporary learning spaces and remote learning activities. The appetite for learning is huge. More than 260,000 children are registered on the agency online learning platform. Curtailing UNRWA's operation now, when needs are so high and the trust in the international community is so low, is counterproductive. It may even sabotage Gaza's recovery and plans for a political transition. Distinguished chairs, the violence in the occupied West Bank is alarming. Since January, nearly 40,000 Palestinian refugees have been displaced by airstrikes, armored bulldozer, and controlled detonation. This is the longest security operation since the Second Intifada and the largest displacement of Palestinians in the West Bank since 1967. The large-scale demolition of buildings, including homes, is new. People cannot return, and the demography of camps is being permanently altered. Palestinian armed groups are increasingly active in the north, deploying improvised explosive devices, including near UNRWA facilities and civilian infrastructure, in violation of international law. Members of the committee, this is a time of tremendous geopolitical uncertainty. For UNRWA, the statu quo is no longer an option. There is a choice to make. The agency can be left to implode due to the Knesset legislation and financial uncertainties. UNRWA's collapse would create a dangerous vacuum in the occupied Palestinian territories in the absence of alternative. It would send shockwaves through Jordan, Lebanon and Syria, where the agency is a lifeline for hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees. An environment in which children are deprived of education and people lack access to basic services is fertile ground for exploitation and extremism. Alternatively, UNRWA can be supported to progressively conclude its mandate within the framework of a political process like that championed by the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution. This would allow the agency to transition its public-like services to empowered and prepared Palestinian institutions. Distinguished Chair, I must stress that the right of Palestinian refugees to protection and assistance are not derived from UNRWA's mandate. They exist independently of the agency. If UNRWA ceases to protect and assist Palestinian refugees, the right will remain, and there will be much greater emphasis on the right to return or to be resettled, for which UNRWA has no mandate. Member of the committee, I must underscore UNRWA's long-standing commitment to neutrality. Following grave allegations last year that 19 UNRWA personnel participated in the abhorrent attack of October 7, I immediately terminated the contract. The Secretary General swiftly tasked the United Nations highest investigative body, the Office of Internal Oversight Services, to conduct an independent investigation. He also commissioned an independent review of UNRWA's adherence to the principle of neutrality. The Colonna report found that UNRWA has the most robust neutrality framework of any comparable entity. It also stressed that UNRWA, like all UN agencies, depend on member states, including Israel, for protection from military and security-related neutrality risk. We will continue making every effort to investigate credible allegations against the agency and its personnel. We recently learned from the media about allegations that a released hostage was held at an UNRWA facility. We requested additional information from Israel, but have not received a response. I must reiterate that UNRWA was forced to evacuate many of its 300 premises in Gaza on IDF military order. Our premises have been misused by both the Israeli forces and Palestinian armed group on multiple occasions. I have repeatedly called for an international investigation to establish the fact and hold all perpetrators accountable. Last year, following close engagement with the European Commission, UNRWA agreed and fulfilled conditions for releasing EU funds and reinforcing the agency neutrality framework. UNRWA has enhanced the vetting of staff, reinforced its internal investigation department, and undergone an audit commissioned by the European Commission. As a result, all EU contributions for 2024 will result, including additional funding requested by this Parliament. And I am deeply, deeply grateful for the continued support of this House. Distinguished guests, I must also address the disinformation campaign portraying UNRWA as a terrorist organization and our staff as terrorist or terrorist sympathizer. Billboards and ads accusing UNRWA of terrorism have appeared in major cities. Google ad campaigns promote websites replete with disinformation about the agency. Disinformation poses a real threat to our staff, especially those in the occupied West Bank and in Gaza, where 275 personnel have been killed. To tackle disinformation, we must insist that independent international media can enter and report from Gaza. Member of the committee, UNRWA financial situation is dire. We have placed more than 600 local staff on leave without pay. We may have to suspend payment to more staff and scale back critical services. An erosion of UNRWA's operation will degrade the capacity of the United Nations. I would like to conclude with one request, which reflects the uncertainty of the present moment. Sustain UNRWA until the political direction of travel is clear. That is, until the international community considers the Gaza Recovery and Reconstruction Plan and the proposal of the Global Alliance for the implementation of the two-state solution. If we do not embed the agency in a political process, it will collapse with consequences for security and stability in the region and beyond. As a steadfast supporter of Palestinian refugees and UNRWA for decades, the leadership of the European Union is urgently needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let us move directly to a first round of questions and answers by coordinators from both committees. We will collect coordinators' questions, and you can then answer to those after the first round. And in the second round, we will have standing rapporteurs from both committees as well as delegation chairs. And finally, a catch the eye for any other members wishing to take the floor. So you may indicate your request to me and to the Secretariat here. So then I'm calling on myself now as EPP AFET coordinator. Thank you very much for your presentation here and for your also the regular updates that you send to members on the situation. You are aware of the discussion that is ongoing also here in this House, and you have partly reacted also to that. I think it is important that we have the people must be the people that you are responsible for, or that the international community is responsible for, that they are in the center of our concern. So it is not so much the institution, but the one who can actually then deliver on the needs that need to be addressed. And so my question goes in the direction, taking note of the discussion that is ongoing, and for me that is the central point. Can anybody at this stage, or could anybody at this stage or at another stage replace you? And who could that be? And how are you reacting on these ongoing discussion? I mean, there is a reality that the Israeli Knesset has decided as it has decided. We note that, and that raises concern, certainly amongst many. But the question there is, if there is, so to say, on the Israeli side, no will to cooperate with you, then what is an alternative that is viable, and it is viable for the people as they need it? I heard from your expose that there are quite some things ongoing without the international staff, so schools, hospitals. Perhaps you can elaborate a bit more what, so to say, the reality on the ground is, what Israel accept still to go on de facto without perhaps a legal base or the discretion that is up to them to decide. So that is for my part. Have we got the DEVE coordinator from EPP? Or who speaks for the... Only those who are present, it says here. Give the AFET and DEVE coordinators interchangeably, only those present. I don't see the EPP. You're the vice coordinator, okay. Hilde? Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Hildegard Benteler. I'm speaking in a double role as the vice chair of the DEVE committee, as the vice chair of the EPP, and as the chair of the EU-Israel delegation. Mr. Lazzarini, I belong to a growing group of colleagues in the European Parliament who are holding the belief that the current EU funding to UNRWA should be redirected to other UN organizations or aid agencies other than UNRWA. And I'll give you in this short 2 minutes I'm having 3 reasons for that. Number 1, trust. Latest after 7th of October, your organization has completely lost the trust of one of the most important actors on the ground, which is Israel. You know the facts very well, the involvement of UNRWA staff in the massacre itself, as well as the terrible open and tacit support. The fact that buildings, hospitals, schools, and UNRWA-associated facilities were and are being used to house, arm, and train terrorists is, from my point of view, understandably a no-go for the Israeli society anymore, and the expression of that was the Knesset's decision to cut off all contacts with UNRWA at the beginning of this year. And this decision was unanimously taken without any no votes. Mr. Lazzarini, dear colleagues, UNRWA's activities are considered as a big security risk by Israel, and as long as this risk is not removed from an Israeli perspective, and I think in this case it's the only relevant one, I can't see us further supporting, rather imposing UNRWA in Gaza. Second, from a donor point of view, monopolistic structures are never good. There is manifold experience with humanitarian crisis coping with UN clusters. I don't see any good reason why trusted UN organizations like UNHCR should not extend its mandate to Gaza and the West Bank. Third, the fundamental problem with UNRWA's mandate and its refugee definition, which keeps the conflict alive and is relieving the Palestinian leadership from its task to provide for economic opportunities, education, health, and infrastructure, as any real state, which we are aiming for, should. When, if not now, when everybody is aiming for long-term and long-lasting solutions for the region, should we finally tackle this issue? My assessment is clear. UNRWA in its current design cannot be of help in the needed process of de-radicalization and political emancipation. It is of harm.
Gracias. Voy a hablar en español.
Thank you very much. I'll be speaking Spanish. First of all, I just wanted to express my condolences and my solidarity with you as an organization, as an agency, because of the number of people who lost their lives while carrying out their jobs. And I would like to go beyond what my colleague Galler said. Here, it's not just about the fact that there's no alternative, and it's not about the fact that it's the only possibility. What we need to highlight is that you have the experience, you have the time, the mandate, and the appropriate staff for this function. So it's not a matter of the UNRWA being the lesser evil. It's a defined, designed instrument for this purpose. And here in the Parliament, there are a lot of people who are worried about the texts and people who are worried about things that are already in the past. And I think that this is a kind of propaganda. And my colleague Dentele, who is not representing a colleague from the extreme right, you can tell she herself is from the extreme right just by listening to what she's saying. But here we have ministers who have clearly said that they want to commit genocide, and they were received with great honours. And indeed, Mrs. Metsola didn't even react to this. So my question to you is, how do you work without the support of the occupying force? And this misconfiance, which Mrs. Bentele is talking about, and she indeed is creating here in the Parliament by saying that the UNRWA is what is keeping the conflict going. This, even to me, is new. I've heard a lot of things about UNRWA here, but what our colleague Bentele has said is new to me today. She's saying that UNRWA's existence is maintaining the conflict. So how can you work in such conditions? What practical areas is your work being made impossible in? And of course, you have the narrative of people from the extreme right, even though they're in a group that isn't from the extreme right.
Thank you. S&D Deve, who is there? Yes. Yeah? So, please.
Thank you very much. I just want to convey all my solidarity to the UNRWA representative, who, as we know very well, UNRWA is crucial in the region, not only in the area, but also in the region. And I'm really sorry that after Monsieur Lazzarini intervention, quoting also and underlining the disinformation issue, I am sorry that this information is put on the table also by the member of this parliament. So I really just want to convey the solidarity of the S&D DEVE group to the huge work that the UNRWA staff on the field are doing. And we will try to support you in as much as we can in any possible table to give our support to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then we have Patriots, Sebastian Stöteler, or somebody else? Oh, Pardelas. S'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner General, thank you for your comments today. UNRWA is an important player in humanitarian management of refugees resulting from war in Palestine and in the nearby countries, and you've referred to the fact that this help is necessary, and of course we're not going to contest that. However, when there are reports from Israeli intelligence services which were documented by a number of newspaper inquirers, have pointed to links over the past weeks and months which have existed between some employees of the organization and the terrorist activities which were carried out by Hamas, and some of them were involved directly or indirectly in the attacks on the 7th of October. And this was recognized by the UN, who then fired those employees. If that situation were to continue, and if the transparency measures weren't taken to put an end to this, it would call into question support, public support from France or from other countries, depending on your reading of these links. If measures are put in place, and I'd like to know what corrective measures you have already put in place to protect the organization from such accusations and from such interference, which, as we know, is minimal. Thank you.
Patriots Deve, George Helveny, are you here? Apparently not. Anybody replacing him? I don't see that, so we go on. ECR, Adam Bielan, or somebody who replaces him? Mr. Storm? Storm? I don't see him. Yeah. Oh, yes. Please.
I am here, but I haven't prepared anything because I'm not in that
Perhaps
committee.
You have a spontaneous
but I can
question.
still answer your question when I have the word, of course. I think already my colleague Hildegard from DV has some very good questions. I will really like to hear the answers of that. Because it is really a big concern to me that if one of the parts in this conflict and this war between Hamas and Israel don't trust your organization, when we will have I don't think that UNRWA is a organization who's actually is able to give that help we want you to do, because I think all of us here in this room want as much aid as possible to the civilians. But if your organization is a problem to that because because the only country actually in this conflict, Israel, don't trust you, and I understand why they don't trust you, because we have been seeing so many evidence of problems with some of your colleagues that's working together with the Hamas. When we have a big issue, don't you think it would be better for the civilization that you stepped away and let other organizations take part of this hope?
Thank you. ECR Devi, is Ms. Margojata Gojewska, is she here? Anybody else? Seems not to be the case. Then Renew. I also don't see Hilde Wautmans, but Herr Brandstetter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lazzarini. I just have a few questions. First of all, you talked about 19 people working for UNRWA who were part of the October 7th attack. So you know about these 19 people. Did you try to find out if there were more persons? How is the relationship to these persons who were part of these attacks to other people working for UNRWA? And how is the mood inside UNRWA as far as these attacks, but also the hostages? And some of the hostages are still in Hamas. How is the mood about those people? Then the second question is about working in Gaza. So how can you work in Gaza? What are your problems there? And how would you imagine you could explain that? And the other question about other organizations. As far as I read it, there are other organizations for food aid and other things who do your work, obviously. You think that that is enough for, or how would you change the situation? And my last question about money. I know about different countries, I think it's Italy and other countries who don't give money to UNRWA anymore. How many countries are there? And how big is your financial problem really? How long can you work if you don't get more money? Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got a renewed Devi? Charles Goerens is definitely not here. I don't see him. Anybody else? Yeah, Bernard. Voilà.
Monsieur Lazzarini.
Mr. Lazzarini, I have a question. You said that UNRWA had turned to the Egyptian authorities about the possibility of using the Rafah passage point. And what was the answer of the Egyptian authorities? And if you haven't yet received an answer from them, what answer do you expect? Thank you.
Merci. For the Greens, Willy Søvndal.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Mr. Lazzarini, thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much for being here in a situation where we all know how extremely difficult the situation is just now. I'm a bit concerned about the continuing baseless accusations from someone also in this room after everything has been examined and cleared out. And I think the real problem just now is that we have, as Europe, to take a bigger burden than we used to in a situation where US aid stopped. And we know all that UNRWA, therefore, is facing a shortage of funding in the recent years. Could you describe a bit closer the current challenges and explain what's needed for UNRWA to continue providing essential services to the million of people who depend on your support? And I think we all know, as a matter of fact, that there is no other organization who could do what you are doing. So it's not a question about you or someone else. It's a question about you or no help to thousands of refugees. Thank you.
Thank you. Greens, Deve, Ana Miranda Paz.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Well, first of all, Mr. Lazzarini, you have all of our solidarity, support, and of course respect. Respect for United Nations agency, respect for international humanitarian law, respect for the fact that the attacks on humanitarian aid are attacks against international humanitarian aid. And we're here as MEPs who have been elected in order to defend peace and to defend human rights, to defend humanitarian aid. And certainly this is the function, the reason why many of us are here today. Many others, we can see they prefer war, defamation, fake news, and mistrust. And so you have all of our support. And when it comes to humanitarian aid and knowledge about this, it would seem that there are many here who are completely ignorant about this. We can see that many people are ignorant about this, and they're even making offensive comments. For example, they don't respect the role of a body even after an investigation. They're not respecting the role of UNRWA in occupied areas and in Gaza. And those of us who have been to Palestine, and if we go there, we will see that UNRWA coordinates with other humanitarian aid agencies. And when I'm speaking, please, could the extreme right please be quiet so that at least my message could be heard. So when we're talking about humanitarian aid, there are efforts against it which are taking place, and by representatives, political representatives, who, if they're able to bring a minister from an occupying state which prevents members of the Palestinian delegation from entering Palestine, and I myself suffered this situation, so they won't allow certain humanitarian aid to be delivered. So for some people there are rules and for others there aren't. So I'm a member of UNRWA and I work in the efforts and in the declarations that I make as a member of the European Parliament. I certainly support UNRWA and I will continue to do so. And I would ask all MEPs to give their support to an agency of the United Nations. It isn't a terrorist agency, it's an agency for peace, for human rights, for survival. And there is no alternative. Mrs. Barella, you were saying, you were talking about ministers and who were involved and caused a genocide, but yet you aren't able to support UNRWA, an agency from the United Nations, and at the same time there are MEPs who aren't even able to enter Palestine because this is being prevented by an occupying state. So, Mr. Lazzarini, you have our full support, and of course, you have the support of the progressive groups. We're all working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we come to the left. I don't see Mr. Botenga. Or who is it? Okay, please. Well, I have. Okay, whoever replaces him, please.
Non, pas de remplacement. Rima Hassan. Je vais m'exprimer en français.
Yes, my name is Rima Hassan. I'll be speaking in French. Well, first of all, I would like to express my solidarity with UNRWA's work, particularly because I'm a child of the Aqaba. I've grown up in Syria and my family lived there since 1948, and I was fortunate enough to get out of there. But this isn't the case for many Palestinians who are living, millions of Palestinians who are living in camps. They aren't just living in the West Bank and in Gaza. Many of them are living in nearby countries. So first of all, to our colleague from the EPP, this is an outrage to the work of UNRWA, because this isn't on behalf of an intellectual entity trying to defend international law, at the very least, the general interest of these organizations, but this is really on behalf of a criminal genocidal state. And Mr. Bardella, who took the floor, has been invited to Israel by Benjamin Netanyahu in the coming weeks. So what's important isn't what you're saying, but where you're coming from. And I would like to denounce what's happening in the parliament. This is Israeli propaganda, which is being passed on circulated by a number of MEPs. In the Netherlands, there was a report last week where there was 20 MEPs who were referred to from this committee who were approached by Israeli lobbyists, and they weren't recorded, they weren't registered for the European Parliament. And so this consortium of journalists identified something very interesting, so that the members of this meeting weren't recorded, and this journalist consortium analysed the discourse of these MEPs before and after having met these lobbyists. And when it comes to the dissolution of UNRWA, that a certain number of UNRWA from this committee defended the dissolution of UNRWA after meeting the ESDF. So this is an Israeli defense organization made up of military reservists who have infiltrated the European Parliament with meetings that weren't even declared. So this is what we're ultimately interested in. Where are you coming from when you're making these points? And speaking today, I'm not just talking about this as an MEP, but also as a Palestinian refugee. The right to return. In some camps, the right to return of Palestinian refugees is being attacked. And this is the agenda of the Israeli regime, to put an end to the right to return of the Palestinian refugees, because it's a demographical challenge. Thank you.
Isabel Serra Sanchez, if I'm not, yeah?
Gracias. Bueno, lo primero...
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. Lazzarini. And you've heard from spokespeople of these genocide state, but they are repeating many of the lies of that state. I would like to thank you and all of UNRWA's workers, Francesca Albanese, and all of the work which has been done in really terrible conditions, inhumane, and from a political point of view, lacking dignity. And on behalf of all of those countries who are participating in this propaganda campaign supported by Israel, this, of course, had an impact on you and your work. And the objectives of this defamation and criminalizing UNRWA are numerous. First of all, preventing you from providing the most basic services to the Palestinian people and to allow them to continue with the genocide. Secondly, they are preventing the right to return of the Palestinians. And third of all, they're attacking the United Nations, because this is, of course, one of the pillars of international law. And finally, because what UNRWA is doing is recalling the fact that Israel is not fulfilling international law for 75 years. And I'm ashamed by the role of Europe in this genocide, because, of course, if we continue to fund a genocide and if we don't break this agreement with Israel, we are essentially funding genocide and this occupation. And even though there is a narrative of genocide which has been repeated because of the attack in October, what's clear is that there is an apartheid, and since that 7th of October, Israel has continued its occupation of the West Bank, preventing your work from taking place, and they are not fulfilling international law. So by way of conclusion, you have to carry out your mandate in Gaza. It needs to be reconstructed. And we need to have a real solution for Palestine, and this would be the sovereignty of the people of Palestine. And Europe will have to stop funding genocide and the genocide state of Israel. And I really hope that this will happen soon, because when it was set up in 1949, this work was supposed to begin in 1 year, and in 1 year they would have fulfilled their mandate if Israel had kept their word. But this isn't the case, so UNRWA needs to continue to exist. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we have, I see you have in the meanwhile arrived Lucas, the EPP DEVE coordinator. He wasn't there when it was. Perhaps I finalize the rule and then I give you the floor. Huh? Okay. ESN Stanislav Stoyanov, is he here? No. ESN Mark Jongen? Also not, so then it's you.
Thank you, Mr. Lazzarini, that you made it this time. I remember once you were meant to visit us and you didn't appear then in the European Parliament, but I'm happy to have you this time. And it's very important that we exchange because we care for people in the Gaza Strip, we care for people in the West Bank, we care for Palestinians as for everybody. And of course, we very much coordinate and cooperate with our strong partner state, the State of Israel, the only Jewish state on earth and the only democratic rule of law-based state in the Middle East. And this is why we are fully aware of the many examples of UNRWA being contaminated by Hamas terrorists and other powers which do not share our values but harm our values, harm people, kill people, and treat them with terroristic means and measures. I don't want to go deeper into these examples because it should remain a parliamentary discourse. I could ask you on specific names of specific teachers, for example, paid and included by UNRWA in its activities who have been Hamas leaders for a long time, already before October 7 and so on. So my question is, how can we change UNRWA? UNRWA is harming the image of the United Nations in its entirety because of the two letters UN. I mean, all the other UN agencies can be, I would say, seen in a very positive way or in a rather positive way. UNRWA is clearly an organization that has failed to fulfill its mission. There is no doubt that humanitarian need is aided in Gaza. There is no doubt that Palestinians are suffering due to the terrorists that lead them and have been leading them for decades. There is no doubt Palestinians would also deserve a structure without anti-Semitism, without hatred, without all of these ideologies of hatred, without terrorist leaders, with economic self-capability, with everybody we have to wish for. With everything we have to wish for everybody, with education, with a civil society, and in the first place with demilitarization and de-weaponization. This is what the Palestinians would need, and for the time being also humanitarian aid. But do you agree that UNRWA will never be capable again to do this task, to fulfill this task of humanitarian aid anymore, because UNRWA is too hampered in its image due to the mistakes that have been committed and done in the past, too far being aligned with terrorists and being contaminated by Hamas terrorists and other powers like this?
Thank you very much. That ends the rounds of coordinators from all the groups. And I give you now the floor for the first round to respond, and then for 8 minutes, and then we have a second round. The floor is yours. Well.
Thank you. Thank you for all your statement and question. I will try to go through them. Some might require more than 8 minutes, but I will just give some headlines. I think one question comes regularly on the table. Is there an alternative to UNRWA? Is there a viable alternative solution for UNRWA? The answer is yes, there is an alternative. The alternative is a functioning state of Palestine. The alternative is empowered, prepared Palestinian institution. We need Palestinian institution. This is the alternative. Now, are we asking if an NGO can do it? No. There is no United Nations organization or NGOs who have been geared to provide public-like services at scale to such a large group of population. What UNRWA does, it's a substitution of a functioning state. So saying that UNRWA is part of the problem, it's like if you say a conflict is expanded because we provide humanitarian assistance. No. If we still have a problem today, it's because of our collective inability to have promoted a genuine, lasting, and fair political solution. And that's where we should today focus. I do believe that statu quo is not an option and should not be an option anymore. I do believe that there is an alternative between a total implosion and leaving a vacuum behind. Because in the conversation, when we talk about who can replace the organization, surprisingly, education feature absolutely nowhere. And you have hundreds of thousands of girls and boys deeply traumatized living in the rubble who will be fed by this despair if they cannot be brought back quickly to an education environment. And today, it's neither the state of Israel or Palestine who can bring back such a number to an education environment. Now, there are questions about the refugee. Here, the refugee statute, and can UNHCR take over or not? Just UNHCR and UNRWA have the same definition. You can be a refugee from one generation to the other one, being under the responsibility of UNHCR. Look at the Western Sahara. You are a refugee for more than 50 years. Look at Afghanistan, now 30, 40 years. Why? Because no durable solution have been found for these people. So now, if the agency stops its activities, of course, we can activate Article 1 of the Refugee Convention, which means we will collectively have the obligation to promote more actively return or resettlement in a third country, which UNRWA doesn't do because we are only asked to provide services until the day there is a political solution. Now, there are questions about, UNRWA has bad reputation, so let's get rid of UNRWA. But UNRWA is not the only one. OHCHR is not in Jerusalem anymore. UN Women is not there too. Most of the international NGOs are not present anymore. And if we do not stand up, whatever happened in the region will, in the future, become the new norm and the new standard in any other conflict. Everything is interconnected. And what happened in Gaza and the West Bank can easily happen in different parts of the world. There was a question about the 19 staff and what kind of measure the agency is taking. First of all, there have never ever been a conclusion that any of them has been responsible. Just to recap, up to the 19, one has been fully reinstated. Everybody agreed, Israel and the UN, that it was a mistake. For 9 people, there were not enough evidence being provided to continue the investigation. And for 9 people, there were enough information to normally pursue the investigation. And if we would be in a position to authenticate and corroborate the information, certainly it would go into a criminal, I would say, type of investigation. But the investigators were not in a position to corroborate. So having said that, the agency is fully aware that we are operating we are not operating in a zero-risk environment. It's far too divided environment, far too emotional environment. We have basically the confrontation of different, very strong narrative in the region, so there is no zero risk. But as an agency, we have a zero-tolerance policy. If we can substantiate information provided to the agency, investigation will take place, and this measure will be taken in proportion to the violation being committed. We have received hundreds of names of people who have been alleged being member of Hamas or being active in the military wing. Each time there is such an allegation, we ask the state of Israel, we ask to any member states who could have information to provide additional element so that a proper investigation can take place. Besides the 19 cases, which are very well known, we have never ever received any reply, and hence investigators were not in a position to do anything. When it comes to the premises, I just want to remind that we have vacated most of the premises on the 12th of October 2023 under military order of the IDF. And since we had a lot of allegations about the misuse of premises by either armed Palestinian group, including Hamas, or also the IDF. And I have constantly called for independent investigation because there is absolutely no doubt if this could be verified, we are talking about blatant disregard of international law. Now, there are questions about Rafah. We have no answer yet. I went now a few times to Cairo. I would say it will very much depend on whether or not the Arab reconstruction plan will take off or not. If it is taking off, if it has the traction, or if this is becoming the direction of travel, I would expect yes. If we go into a complete different type of scenario in the coming weeks or coming months, the answer might be no. So again, I don't have an answer for the time being, but we have to pursue all possible avenues. I think the main challenges going ahead is more of the same, more polarization, more statu quo, and a lack of determination and courage once for all to address the conflict. And that would certainly leave the agency after that in limbo. We are an agency mandated by the UN General Assembly, by the member states, but we are not receiving so-called assessed contribution, which means that we completely depend on voluntary contribution of member states. We do not have the fiscal tool of a member state, hence this high level of dependency, which makes me think that there was a question about how many countries have suspended. The suspension is today official from the United States. They suspended more than a year ago. And the second country in Europe which has announced that they are suspending but pursue political support to the agency is Sweden. All other countries have not officially decided either to suspend or to pursue. Some of them have not decided to pursue or to suspend, and we are still waiting for the answer. I think the Netherlands has decided in 4 years, so it's basically a stage approach. They are still contributing to the agency, and I believe that in 4 years, depending on the direction of travel, things might not be fully set in stone. Thank you. Sorry.
Other things you can answer.
Yeah.
So, please.
Thank you so much, Commissioner General, for those answers. And we'll go for the second round. And I'll just remind members that the Commissioner General needs to leave at 15:15 because of the Syria conference. So this round is institutional speakers and catch the eyes. And the AFET Standing Rapporteur for Israel does not seem to be in the room. So we go to the next person, which is the AFET Standing Rapporteur for Palestine, Evin Insir. The floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. First and foremost, I just want to address some of the things that have been said by my colleagues. To colleague Bentele, I think we both know that the distrust in UNRWA from the side of the Israeli government, from the side of yourself, and some other on the right and far right side didn't come after 7th of October. The witch hunt of UNRWA came long time before. However, many of those allegations that has also already been explained has been totally baseless. And when it comes to the staff of UNRWA, which I think is important also to say, is that UNRWA has been provided list of staff to the Israeli authorities for decades without any complaints by the Israeli authorities. Yes, UNRWA had needed maybe to do better research, but the Israeli authorities could have also, instead of banning UNRWA, facilitated, helped out on this part. Instead, they decided to ban UNRWA. And not only ban, soon, if the far-right government of Israel gets what it wants, the Israeli people will not be able to interact with ICC, ICJ, and other internationally important organizations. So this is not a witch hunt on only UNRWA, but it is on the whole UN structure, which is very big, very problematic. To Mr. Lazzarini, I just want to say that we are many who support UNRWA, and we will be continuing supporting UNRWA, because supporting UNRWA is supporting international law and standing up for what is right. I have a question on the legislation in Israel that was stressfully put into force in February. It says that it applies on Israeli territories, but we know that it also has effect on the occupied territories. So what has been the effect of this ban on also the work of UNRWA in the West Bank and of course in Gaza also? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. The standing rapporteur from DEVE for humanitarian aid is not in the room. The chair of the delegation for relations with Israel, Hildegard, you already spoken, so we go to the chair of the delegation for relations with Palestine, is not in the room. So that brings me to the quite long list of Catch the Eye, and we'll start with 1 minute only, and I'll start with Mr. Stier from EPP Group. Stier, sorry, from the EPP Group.
Thank you, Chair. I have a comment, actually. I believe UNRWA, first of all, is not a terrorist organization. And I didn't hear any of my colleagues from the EPP saying so. So that will be a false accusation. I did hear, however, people supporting UNRWA, however, saying that Israel is a genocidal state. Not accusing an individual of genocide, which then will be prosecuted, or a government that can be removed, but a state. If a state is genocidal, then it should be destroyed. If you are calling for destroying the state of Israel, that is not being progressive, that is anti-Semitism. So I think that we need to make this differentiation, and I would like you to, Commissioner-General, to use this opportunity also to make clear your views on that, because I do believe that if UNRWA is to be supported, it has to be supported in the right way, not with a narrative that is linked to anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Mrs. Temido, S&D Group.
Muito obrigada, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. I had an opportunity to go to Palestine and Israel a fortnight ago, and I visited a school in Ramallah in the West Bank. I saw classrooms and children learning, but in the playground I saw small children that could see a wall around a settlement, and that's a clear message indicating what these children are being exposed to. It's nothing to do with extremism or ideology. It's a basic position. So my question is as follows. I too trust UNRWA's work. So my question is, in your view, what does the future hold for the region if UNRWA has to stop its work? Has there been any impact study done as to what would happen in the region without the support of UNRWA?
Thank you very much. I give the floor now to Mr. Kolar, EPP Group.
Thank you very much. Well, I must say that I'm a little bit shocked by what I've heard here from some of my colleagues, but I just came across a video of the Palestinian ambassador to the United Kingdom who said, and I quote, "We will leave back to our homes inside the 1948 areas. We will go back to our land and we'll go back to Jaffa and Haifa." Well, this, without being biased by any propaganda, brings me to a conclusion that the Palestinians do not want peace. They will never recognize Israel. And my only question to you, Mr. Lazzarini, is, do you agree with what I have quoted that the Palestinian ambassador to the United Kingdom has said? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I now give the floor to Munir Saturi from the Greens.
sincèrement, il y a des propos...
Well, quite frankly, some of the things being heard from the right and the extreme right are difficult to digest. You're bringing Israeli propaganda into our debate. The Israeli government has always said it has two enemies, UNRWA and international justice. And you're falling into the trap perfectly. I would like to reiterate our support for UNRWA and ask a question. The extreme right and the Netanyahu recently said that the Israeli government would collect up your humanitarian aid, the humanitarian aid that you bring. Have you heard that? And what impact would that have for civilian populations? And then the previous commissioner placed restrictions on European funds which traditionally are paid at the beginning of the year. Where do you stand on possibly getting the EU funds that have been promised? Do you have any guarantees you're going to get that money in the coming weeks, particularly given the lack of stability you have under the Israeli government?
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Tineke Strik, the Greens.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair and Mr. Lazzarini. I would like to praise and commend your crucial work over the years. I recently visited the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and it really hurts to see an empty headquarters. Criminalization of a UN body executing international law with a mandate adopted by the UN is a violation of international law itself. And it also deprives the Palestinian people, who are already in dire need for basic support, they completely rely on, which is a crime against humanity in itself. I would like to call upon colleagues to refrain from and clearly condemn these irresponsible smear campaigns by Israel, which are aimed to silence criticism. And when I hear my colleagues echoing these lies, I urge them to come with evidence after the extensive reviews that the Commission made. And yes, Palestinians do have the right to return. The replacement, displacement, and all violations of human rights should never be rewarded but punished. Schools and hospitals are now run by local staff, which is great, but how long-lasting is this, would be my question. What will be the consequences for the longer term, and will Palestinian authorities be capable of taking over these tasks? And indeed, what funding do you get from the EU and the member states, and what would you need from us? And apart from funding, maybe also other type of moral or public support. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I give the floor now to Mr. Georgiou from the Left Group. 1 minute, please. Okay. Maybe we got the wrong name. Okay. Were we sort of... Yeah, yes, please.
Ευχαριστώ.
Mr. Thank you. Misanthropy and cynicism, this is what we are experiencing here. We see MEPs throwing stones, just like the European Union, throwing stones and fighting against the UNRWA at a point in time when there is an effort by Israel to expel the Palestinians from their own land. The Europeans also have expelled UNRWA alongside with Israel. The objective here is that the US and Israel should not only do the weapons trade through Gaza, but many other similar things. And as regards the fights against terrorism, this goes in favor of Israel in their efforts against the Palestinian people. So we aim to promote assistance to Palestinians, to help UNRWA save lives. 6,000 people, UNRWA staff, have been given leave without pay. This is terrible. They should be returned to their jobs alongside with many others, and we are we are on the side of the Palestinian people who should have their country back in the borders before 1967.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to correct myself. It was a mistake there with Mr. Papadakis from Non-Inscrit. So the last question will come from Mr. Martin Frias from the Patriots, and then we give the floor to Mr. Lazzarini to answer.
Muchas gracias, señor Lazzarini.
Thank you, Mr. Lazzarini. There are good reasons for this attack on UNRWA. There's no insult or political label that can conceal the fact that at least 12 UNRWA staff took part in the Hamas attack on the 7th of October, where women, children and old people were assassinated. There's no political label or insult that can conceal the direct involvement and the use of UNRWA in Gaza. There's no political label or insult that can conceal the fact that 23% of the employed men had links with Hamas, and there's no political label or insult that can conceal the fact that the texts supplied to the people of Israel. So for those reasons, UNRWA needs to be dismantled because it is an organisation linked to terrorist activity. We'd have to find some other kind of organisation that can help.
Okay, thank you so much. Now I give the floor back to Commissioner-General Lazzarini for answers for 8 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And also let me reiterate what I said in my introductory remark, that the support of the Parliament, this Commission, is absolutely critical, and it's an important expression of solidarity to the Palestinians who sometimes have the feeling that the world has turned its back. But it's clearly not the case, and I'm very reassured that I will be able again to reconvey back this message to my colleagues on the ground. There have been questions about what has changed, especially in the West Bank, or possibly in Gaza and West Bank, where we do not have international staff. Now, clearly, the services we are providing are public-like services. They are being provided by Palestinian refugees to Palestinian refugees. You might remember that already during the COVID period, we were almost the only operational agency. Why? Because our staff is embedded in the economy, in the population that we are serving. So when it comes to the activity in the West Bank, the real impact of the absence of international staff is that international staff cannot be the in-between anymore between the Palestinian and the Israeli, and it exposes our staff much more to possible incident in checkpoints on where security operations are taking place, because the international are not on the spot to do any type of deconfliction. So they are much more exposed, I would say, but despite that, our schools are functioning, our health center continue to receive thousands of people on a daily basis, and the same happened in Gaza. When the General Attorney responded to the High Court of Justice about what the implication of the law, it was the only directive, official directive, that we received in terms of interpretation from the government, and it was very clear. When it comes to the West Bank, it's up to the Palestinian authorities to decide whether, yes or not, UNRWA should continue its activities. Now, what will be the future of the agency? Again, I don't know. I am just saying that I do believe that after decades of investment in human development, the agency, if it disappears without a viable solution or alternative, it will create a terrible vacuum. And we all know that in a region like this one, vacuum usually is a fertile ground for more despair, and it will certainly sow the seeds for more extremism. Yes, you can come here also, or in your country. Basically, a lot of Arab countries are expecting that Europe will open its doors like you have opened the door for other refugees, basically. So, and that's the kind of discussion you would certainly have in the neighboring country. There were a question about the control of the Israeli army for the humanitarian assistance. It's possible. That's the primary obligation of an occupying power. I think the question for all of us is whether or not the space being provided to UN agencies or humanitarian organizations will allow us to have a principled response to the need of the people. As long as the response can be principled, we will be able to respond to the need. Once it is not possible anymore, we might become kind of a third parties contractor, which means the beginning of a future privatization of humanitarian assistance, which I believe is what's emerging in when you go to Gaza, you think about a kind of post-apocalyptic type of environment. So this is a very dystopian possible scenario. Now, when it comes to the EU contribution to the agency, we are in discussion about the timing for the release of the contribution. I understand that there are some technical hurdles which needs to be addressed, and we are expecting a release between April and May. That's the latest information that I do have for the time being. For the agency, the soonest, the best, because we might not be able to muddle through much, much longer. What do we need in addition of a financial support? We need political clarity. We need to be part of any possible political process where we clearly delineate the expectation and the role of the agency. We have to accept the idea that we enter into a transition phase, and that during this transition, we are not only delivering services, but we are also building up the services of the future recipient of the agency. And here, again, I did it, but I do it again, Marta, just to acknowledge your support, which is highly, deeply appreciated. And again, just to reassure most skeptic member of the parliament, which is normal, because I know that this discussion, it's a very difficult one. It can be divisive, can be emotional also. But be reassured that within the agency, we are also looking at transition. We are also looking at ending the activities. But I do believe that it would be a terrible mistake to throw the baby with the water of the bath at the same time. And here we are confronted to a choice. And I think the region and the Palestinian and Israel deserve certainly much better than that. So again, your support is not only of a financial nature, but it's also of a political nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner General, so much on behalf of the Development Committee. Thank you for joining us here today and sharing your valuable perspectives. And I think that today's discussion has really emphasized the pressing need for continued humanitarian support to Palestinians, while of course underscoring the importance of transparency, efficiency, and accountability in delivering humanitarian assistance. So colleagues, please just to give us 1 minute more. The European Parliament, as you heard, committed to constructive engagement on these critical issues, as you heard, Commissioner General, and we wish you success in your important work and look forward to further exchanges. And I will give the floor now to my colleague, Afid.
Yes, thank you very much. Also from my side for the Foreign Affairs Committee, thanks for this important exchange of views. Our continent has long and historic ties with the region and its people. The absence of peace also affects us. It is therefore crucial that the EU takes a proactive stance in finding a solution that brings security to Israel and fulfills the right to self-determination for Palestinians. What the future has on stock for us and for UNRWA, you have indicated there may be changes, but as long as those who gave you the mandate to pursue this task, as long as this mandate is there, you have to work on the ground, and what the future brings and what setup remains then to be seen. So once again, thank you very much and all the best in your challenging task. I conclude this meeting. Thank you all who joined, and to the interpreters, many thanks. And we will resume our meeting in the same room as AFET at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur.